In 2001, Diddy was sued by his former driver, Wardell Fenderson, for $3 million. Fenderson alleged that Diddy had offered him $50,000 to lie to the police about a gun that was found in Diddy's car following that 1999 nightclub shooting incident that involved Diddy, his then girlfriend Jennifer Lopez, and the rapper Shine. Fenderson claimed that after the shooting, Diddy actually pressured him to falsely testify about the presence of a gun in the vehicle. And as a result, Fenderson stated that he suffered emotional distress and physical injuries from the incident. The lawsuit was settled out of court for an undisclosed amount, and this represented something of a loose end for Diddy following that Shine case. But once again, Diddy was able to pull out his checkbook and make the problem go away. And sadly, Diddy's dishonorable habits would only continue throughout the decade. On March 26, 2001, Michigan TV host Roger Mills filed a lawsuit against Diddy, accusing him of an assault that allegedly took place following a 1999 interview. Mills claimed that during an interview with WCHB TV in Detroit, he questioned Diddy about his rumored connection to the murder of the Notorious B.I.G., a topic that apparently sparked anger. The Notorious B.I.G., born Christopher Wallace, was killed in a drive-by shooting in Los Angeles in 1997, just months after a similar incident that took the life of Tupac Shakur. According to Mills, Diddy's representative requested the tape of the interview, but when Mills refused to hand it over, Diddy's entourage allegedly attacked the host and forcibly took the tape. Diddy's team vehemently denied the claims, with the spokeswoman accusing Mills of attempting to extort the rapper. In a 2004 civil trial, a jury ultimately sided with Diddy, ruling in his favor and dismissing the allegations. In this case, it wasn't a payment that helped him avoid liability, but likely his access to a high-ticket legal team was still enabling Diddy to convert his questionable riches into bulletproof legal defenses that would allow him to avoid responsibility for anything that went down. But ironically for Diddy, it would seem that he had endless money to fight charges, but he would seemingly get stingy when it came to supporting his own family. In 2001, model Kim Porter sued Diddy for additional child support following a prolonged dispute regarding their then 3-year-old son, Christian Combs. Now, this case was actually settled, with Diddy agreeing to pay Porter a substantial 5-figure monthly sum covering Christian's education and medical expenses until he turned 21. Diddy, who had actually fathered 6 children by 4 different women, co-parented 4 of these children with Porter, including Christian and twin daughters Delilah and Jessie, and in addition to that, he would actually adopt Porter's son Quincy from a previous relationship with Albie Shaw. Diddy's other children include Justin, whose mother is Misa Hilton, and Chance, born to Sarah Chapman. His youngest daughter Love was born in 2022 to Dana Tran. Despite their on and off relationship, Diddy and Kim Porter maintained a co-parenting relationship until Porter's tragic and sudden death in 2019 from pneumonia. Now, rumors have swirled for years questioning the circumstances of Kim Porter's death, amid rumors that she was planning to release a tell-all book exposing Diddy. And while we may never know whether or not there was more dark activities going on behind the scenes of Kim and Diddy's relationship, it would seem that, as always, just before Diddy's due to be exposed to a downfall, things would always seem to just miraculously work out in his favor. And as the decade progressed, Diddy would continue to catch cases and finesse his way out of tight spots at the very last minute. In May 2002, North Carolina resident Cedric Bobby Lemon sued Diddy, alleging that while working as a limousine driver, he wore an identification badge that permitted him to stand backstage during a concert by Mary J. Blige in June 1995. Now, Diddy was Blige's manager at the time, and according to the lawsuit, as Blige's set ended, 2 bodyguards attempted to clear the backstage area in order to escort Blige out of the venue. These 2 would then allegedly punch Lemon in the head, kick him in the back, and break his right ankle. The lawsuit stated that Combs was negligent because he failed to properly train these bodyguards. Initially, in 2002, a judge had entered a default judgment against Diddy for $2.45 million because he failed to answer the allegations in Lemon's lawsuit, but these damages were later reduced to $450,000, and in 2004, the $450K lawsuit judgment was actually vacated after the North Carolina Court of Appeals ruled that Lemon's case didn't meet the standards of a default judgment. Diddy and Lemon would then settle out of court in 2006 for an undisclosed amount. Now, it's important to note that Lemon had earlier brought the first action in July 1996 against several defendants, including the 2 bodyguards and their employer, Steve Lucas Management. That action resulted in judgment against Steve Lucas Management, but Lemon had also brought a second action in May 1999 against Mary J. Blige, which had then been settled out of court. Since the case was settled out of court, we might never know exactly what happened definitively, but by this point, it's not hard to imagine Diddy making use of his hired goons to inflict serious bodily harm on somebody who doesn't do exactly what he wants. And it would appear that Diddy was still just as ruthless in the boardroom as he was in backstage confrontations. In 2003, former Bad Boy Entertainment executive Kirk Burrowes filed a $25 million lawsuit against Diddy and attorney Kenneth Meiselas, with Bad Boy Entertainment also named as defendant for using intimidation tactics back in 1996. Burrowes claimed that Diddy and Meiselas had allegedly threatened him with a baseball bat, forcing him to sign over his rights to company stock, making him the victim of an extortion and racketeering scheme carried out by Diddy. Burrowes, who had been fired from Bad Boy Entertainment in 1997, claimed that in 1993 he was promised a 25% ownership stake in Bad Boy, which he would later be forced to relinquish in 1996 under threats of violence, something that he would actually explain in detail in an interview with the Art of Dialogue channel.
I had 25% of the company. I didn't know why he needed to get that back from me and then give it back to me again. I didn't understand that. So he came into my office one day unexpected, him and Kenny Marsalis, they had it planned out. Kenny had the briefcase with all the stock certificates in it, and Diddy had the bat. Not like, I'm gonna beat out of you with the bat, but he had the bat like, man, we got to do this. This has to happen. I didn't feel I was gonna get beat down in that office, in all honesty. I got people that could jump out of the shadows in a minute. I wasn't threatened by him. What I was messed up over was the fact that I started this company with you from day zero, and now the one solid thing that you told me I had, you want to take that back and do a return to me on that at this critical time that we're renegotiating and getting a step up on the contract. When he told me it was about all of that renegotiating and that I should trust, I did, begrudgingly, angry, upset. It wasn't right. I did it. He got the stock back. I went on, tried to get over that, kept doing my job, doing what I had to do, delivering everything. And once again, I was caught up in the job. I forgot all about it. And next thing you know, we had the snafu. I was fired. And he just said, oh, okay, bye. And since he had never given me the stock back, he never said that he would pay me anything or give me anything. He just avoided me all these years.
He would also assert that Combs periodically promised to restore his interest in Bad Boy, but in 2001 made it clear that this promise would not be fulfilled. Additionally, Burrowes would claim that Diddy and Marsalis interfered with his management contracts and blackballed him from the music industry. Burrowes would bring 4 claims under the Federal Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, or RICO charges, as well as state law claims. However, the court would find that the RICO claims were barred by the statute of limitations and that his allegations failed to meet the legal standards for a RICO violation. After years of litigation, the court would dismiss all of Burrowes' federal claims with prejudice, while his state law claims would be dismissed without prejudice on March 12, 2004. And at this point, things were getting strange, and it seemed that no matter how violent or ruthless Diddy was being perceived as in the public eye, he simply couldn't stop and wouldn't stop. In the next lawsuit, Damien Vasquez alleged that in February 2002, after being told that he could no longer work in the Bad Boy Entertainment main offices, he was given an envelope containing music industry contact sheets by a Bad Boy HR employee where he was advised to send his resume. A month later, following a car accident he was involved in, the envelope was stored in his parents' garage, which he rediscovered in late 2003. Upon reviewing the contents, he realized that the contact sheets included personal information about Diddy. Recognizing this, he reached out to Diddy to arrange their return. Shortly afterward, Vasquez was summoned to meet with Bad Boy HR, where he was questioned about the contact sheets, but not accused of any wrongdoing. Despite working for Bad Boy, he had not been paid his wages and ultimately decided not to return to work after the 2003 holidays. According to the lawsuit, in early 2004, Vasquez learned that Diddy was missing a Grammy Award that he had won the same year, and he would email Diddy with apparent information that he believed might help him find it, but instead, he was allegedly called to a police precinct under the pretense of a job interview. Once there, he was interrogated by NYPD detective Gloria Frazier, who is also mentioned as a defendant in the suit, among others, regarding this missing Grammy. He would apparently be coerced to confess after being threatened with incarceration, and despite being a diabetic, Vasquez's health needs were neglected, leading him to collapse and be hospitalized. After his release from hospital, Vasquez was brought back to the precinct and repeatedly questioned about the Grammy by Frazier and 3 more officers. But after this interrogation failed, he would then be charged with minor crimes that had no connection to the missing award, and he would allege that he was held without being properly informed of his rights and later arraigned on charges of aggravated harassment, petty larceny, and possession of stolen property in concert with Diddy and Bad Boy employees. But all charges were dropped on April 7, 2005. But this situation was particularly disturbing, as it seemingly hinted towards some kind of collusion between Diddy and New York City law enforcement. With the possibility of the authorities being in Diddy's pocket, this would make him an incredibly dangerous enemy. But that didn't stop people continuing to take him to task and putting him in the courtroom to try and make him right his wrongs. In 2005, Bridgeport Music Incorporated and Westbound Records Incorporated would file a lawsuit against the estate of Christopher Wallace, or the Notorious B.I.G., as well as Diddy and Bad Boy Records, claiming that the title track of the album Ready to Die contained an unlicensed sample from the Ohio Players song Singing in the Morning. The lawsuit alleged that Bad Boy Records and its affiliates released Ready to Die without securing proper clearance for the Ohio Players track, leading to copyright infringement. The case centered around claims that Ready to Die contained the unauthorized sample, which was substituted into the track after a denied request to sample Jimi Hendrix's Power to Love. Despite knowing that this sample hadn't been cleared, Bad Boy proceeded with the album's release anyway. Bridgeport Music, a Michigan music publishing company which held the copyright to the composition, and Westbound Records, which held the rights to the sound recording, pursued damages for this infringement. And in this case, the jury would actually find Diddy and Bad Boy Records, as well as the other defendants, liable for copyright infringement. And they awarded $733,878 in compensatory damages, which was split between Bridgeport Music and Westbound Records. Bridgeport Music opted for statutory damages and received the maximum award of $150,000 under the Copyright Act. Additionally, Westbound Records was awarded $3.5 million in punitive damages due to the willful nature of this infringement. Perhaps this was one of the few cases where Diddy was unable to buy or intimidate his way out of things. However, as a multi-millionaire and future billionaire, Diddy probably saw something like this as trivial as a speeding ticket. But blood was now in the water, and it would seem that at least large corporations were not afraid of taking Diddy to court and trying to get a piece of his pockets. Also in 2005, Diddy and publishing giant Random House reached a settlement after a dispute over an incomplete memoir. Diddy had reportedly been given a $300,000 advance in 1999 to write the book, but he never delivered the manuscript. And as a result, the planned memoir was scrapped and the legal matter was settled out of court. Perhaps with all of the rumors of various tell-all books on Diddy circulating, he didn't fancy confronting his own past and attempting to put his story out there to the public. But once again, it shows that Diddy is not necessarily someone who can be trusted to stick to their obligations in relationships or business, and this would be a trend that continued to get exposed in lawsuit after lawsuit. In 2007, former consultant James Sabatino, who's currently incarcerated over a string of criminal fraud cases racked up over years, actually sued Diddy for $19 million, claiming that Diddy had failed to pay him in full for a 1994 recording by the notorious B.I.G. made in Miami. Sabatino alleged that he was owed money for the unreleased material, but that lawsuit was dismissed in 2009. Now separately, Sabatino actually found himself at the center of a major scandal in 2008 when a fraudulent story connected to both Diddy and the late Tupac Shakur was published by the Los Angeles Times. Sabatino had apparently fed the paper fake FBI documents claiming to link Diddy to the attempted murder of Tupac in 1994. And insanely, the paper actually published these documents without any oversight, publicly implicating Diddy in Shakur's 1994 shooting. This mistake would actually force the paper to issue a public retraction after these claims were proven to be fabricated. However, as time's gone on, more and more people have seemingly analyzed the alleged connection between Diddy and the tragic fate of Tupac Shakur. Since the arrest of one of the alleged killers of Tupac, Keefe D, it's looking more and more likely that Diddy might actually end up finally being implicated in this murder officially. But in the meantime, Diddy would continue on for decades with his debaucherous behavior. In 2007, Gerard Reignitzer sued Diddy, alleging that Diddy had assaulted him outside of a Hollywood nightclub. Reignitzer claimed that the altercation occurred after he approached Diddy, who was speaking to his girlfriend. And according to the lawsuit, Diddy actually punched the man in the face, causing him to fly backwards several feet, and allegedly pushed the girlfriend as well. Diddy's lawyer actually dismissed these claims as fabricated, calling it another example of an opportunist trying to exploit Diddy's celebrity status. The lawsuit was settled in 2008, once again for an undisclosed amount, but once again, it's chilling to see Diddy try and brand his accusers as opportunists when he's seemingly the biggest opportunist out here, taking every opportunity to assault, rob, and steal from anyone who enters his orbit. And with the tape of him actually assaulting his ex-girlfriend Cassie that circulated decades later, it's certainly not a stretch for me to imagine Diddy being the ultimate opportunist assaulting a man and his girlfriend, and of course, paying his way out of any consequences. But from here, the disgusting behavior of Diddy would only continue. On October the 22nd, 2007, Jonathan Lee Riches, an American renowned for his unorthodox pursuit of wealth and legal antics, famous for filing suits against prominent figures like Bill Gates and Pope Benedict, and a man who even went on to sue Guinness itself after discovering that they listed him as holding the record for the most lawsuits filed, would file bizarre allegations targeted at Diddy and Bad Boy Records. Riches would claim that Diddy engaged in various acts including racketeering and conspiring with various public figures and companies in highly unlikely scenarios. The claims also involved an alleged conspiracy that included creating subliminal messages in music and using various tactics to control the entertainment industry. He was apparently seeking $25 million along with a temporary restraining order from Diddy because, as he stated in the suit, his life was in danger. The lawsuit, however, was filled with improbable and sensational statements rather than verifiable facts, resembling more of an elaborate, exaggerated narrative rather than a substantial and official legal claim. Now, this is probably the most unbelievable lawsuit in Diddy's entire career of being sued, and arguably, this genuine opportunist actually gave Diddy the perfect smokescreen to dismiss many possibly genuine allegations as being the result of the same sort of embellishments. But as we get into the 2010s, we would see Diddy continue to be sued, admittedly with less frequency, as the diddler seemingly made an effort to try and control his public image and avoid controversy with limited results. In 2010, former Bad Boy Records executive Francesca Sparrow filed a $12 million lawsuit against Diddy, alleging age discrimination and wrongful termination. Sparrow, who had worked with Diddy for years, claimed that she was fired because of her age and disability following a 2008 hip surgery. At the time of the lawsuit, Sparrow was 51 years old and argued that their professional relationship had deteriorated due to her age and health issues. Diddy's legal team denied the accusations, but the lawsuit was once again ultimately settled in 2011 for an undisclosed amount. Now, Diddy doesn't strike me as somebody who looks out for those around him, and the harsh reality appears to be that this is a man who uses people up and discards them as soon as they're no longer useful. And it seems that for Diddy, the world revolves around him, and he extends very little empathy to those working with or close to him. But ironically, despite this deranged creep chasing that celebrity lifestyle, this short-tempered man-child still can't seem to process his emotions when the predictable aspects of his celebrity life played out in front of him. In 2011, paparazzo Gustavo Garces filed a lawsuit against Diddy, claiming that Diddy's bodyguards assaulted him on New Year's Eve whilst he was trying to take a photo of the rapper outside the Dream Hotel in Miami. Garces alleged that the bodyguards used excessive force during the incident. This lawsuit was settled in 2017, with Garces agreeing to receive $35,000 in exchange for releasing Diddy and his bodyguards and their insurance company from further liability. By this point, we're building up a profile of Diddy as a pretty pathetic and short-tempered individual who can't even bear his photo being taken without ordering an assault. The fact that this man was still able to function and navigate society unchecked at this point and for so long is truly baffling. And it really makes you wonder, like, really, are the people around Diddy as bad as him? Because there's clearly a vacuum of morals in his inner circle. And I think it's important to point out that these goons assaulting people on Diddy's behalf are just as bad as him and should be held equally responsible. For every assault that Diddy committed, there's an army of goons, bodyguards, handlers, and employees just as willing to help him commit crimes and cover it up. Now, it's my hope that eventually these people around him will also be held to account for their heinous crimes too. However, the likelihood of that happening is still pretty in question. In 2017, Diddy was sued by his former personal chef, Cindy Rueda, for $15 million. Rueda accused Diddy of harassment, claiming that she had walked in on him having sex while serving him breakfast, and that he, along with another boss, made inappropriate comments about her. She also alleged that Diddy exposed himself to her and forced her to work long hours without proper breaks or compensation for overtime and travel. Rueda further claimed that she was fired after raising these concerns, and the lawsuit was once again settled in 2019 for an undisclosed amount. Now, I personally find these sorts of accusations to be incredibly chilling, and it's clear at this point that Diddy had no respect for women or people's personal boundaries. But at this point, with multiple decades of success under his belt, over a dozen lawsuits or legal cases, there's very few examples of him actually facing reasonable consequences for things that he's allegedly done. I would say that Diddy likely saw himself as like a god, someone that couldn't be touched. Anything he said goes. And if you're unlucky enough to be in front of him and not willing to do exactly what he wants, you better prepare to be violated with no chance of justice, and maybe a little out-of-court settlement. But thankfully, as we get into the 2020s, we begin to see the downfall of this disgusting excuse of a man, as eventually the house of cards would begin to topple, as a series of extremely brave women and men would stand up and say that it's time to stop this repulsive monster.